people kind of start rolling in. Hey, Maria, Juliana, Cece, Bose. Awesome. Yeah, we've had an international crew, and I wasn't sure if some of our, hey, Ebony, our international folks would join, but I know Joe from India said she wanted to listen in and hear about the process. So that's cool. Bose, you are too. Welcome. We're going to wait a couple minutes to have others join us. And just so you know, for this one, we're going to kind of spotlight Nana in terms of she's going to present. And then when we get it to a discussion, we'll promote everyone to panelists, and then you can turn on your mic and computer and all that stuff. Okay, hey, Cece. Okay, we'll give it a couple minutes. It's 12:02. We had a lot of people registering new for this, so I'm expecting a crowd. But good to see everyone. Hey, Maria. San Diego. Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm going to get started, just kind of walk through like our little introduction. Welcome everyone, and I know others are going to be joining us. So welcome to our Stay Well at Home series. I think this is 13 maybe, or 14, in our bi-weekly series that we started after COVID pandemic hit. We have had such an awesome variety of presenters, from, learning how to make body lotions and facial scrubs to bean cakes in Nigeria to vision boards by Cece, and so many different cool things that we've all learned from this series. And we're really excited to have our partner and friend Nana come and talk to us about voting. And we all know that this is a very important election, to be an understatement, and it's just really important that we all have the tools, not only for ourselves, but to pass on to others in our community. So I'm really excited to do this session today. In 2 weeks, we're going to have our kind of final session for this series, and we're going to have a registered dietitian, Maya Feller, who is going to talk to us about how food can, impact our immune system and what we can do to kind of utilize food and nutrition to boost immunity, overall. And so she's going to be taking a lot of questions. So come with all the questions if you have questions around veganism and nutrition, or being a vegetarian or anything. We're excited to have her. And just to recap, for those of you who are new, my name is Krista Martell. I'm the executive director from the Well Project. And we also have Gina Brown, who is one of our CAB members and WRI members, is here wearing her social worker hat. So since we are in a still very tumultuous time in our country, and everywhere really, globally, if anyone needs to just kind of talk to Gina, either offline or after this session, just shoot her a message and she'll connect with you. And she's been here throughout the series, which has been really helpful to have her. So thank you. And also, I just need to do one thing. We have Olivia Ford, who is on here. Let me just, I'm sorry, one second. She is also here, and she is going to help moderate both the chat as well as any questions that come in during Nana's presentation. And if you have a clarifying question, she'll just jump in and kind of pose that to Nana so she can answer that. And then she'll also be taking notes in the chat just to kind of update people. And yeah, I think that is really it. So we will be, like I said, maybe at the beginning, I'll just repeat myself that after Nana presents, we're going to open it up for discussion. So at that point, we'll, promote everyone to panelists. And if you want to come on camera and take your microphone on, you can do that in person or quote unquote in person on video. So with that, I'll just hand it over to Gina and then Olivia to say hello, and then we'll hand it over to Nana.
Hello, everybody. As Krista said, I'm here if you need me. You can put it in your email or whatever message in the chat, and I'll make sure I follow up with you. Nana, I may need some counseling after this one myself. And once we get into it, because I know it's gonna be really, really good. But one of those things. So it's good to see y'all.
Hi, good to see everyone. Can you hear me? I have chronic audio issues. Oh, awesome. Okay, great. Okay, I'll just do my usual thing. If you have questions in the chat box, make sure that Nana gets them during the flow of the session. Please also, if you haven't already, set your chat to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see what you're saying. Unless you're just saying something that the panelist needs to read, obviously. Saving democracy, yes, absolutely. Really excited for this one. Take it away.
Okay, Nana, do I need to share the screen specifically with you, or you?
No, I got it. I can share. Okay. Cool. Are you seeing my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, everyone. It's so good to be here with you all. I am not great at watching the chat box while I'm presenting because I have this on full screen. So I'm going to count on Olivia to let me know if there's something in there that I should be addressing. Thank you so much. We always have each other's backs. So I'm Naina Khanna, pronouns she or they. I am the director of Positive Women's Network and also our affiliate, Positive Women's Network Action Fund, which is an entity that works specifically on electoral organizing. So I'm gonna talk today about why it's so important that we be involved in this election cycle and concrete ways you can do that. And I want to just start by really thanking the Well Project for inviting me to come and speak here. The Well Project is such a key organization in our community. I'm really grateful for everything that they do as a woman living with HIV myself. And we have had a long legacy of partnership between Positive Women's Network and the Well Project of collaboration on behalf of women, trans folks, and really all people living with HIV to advance justice. So I titled this presentation, Honoring Our Legacy and Protecting Our Future, Mobilize the HIV Vote, because I believe that there is so much at stake in this moment. And I know that all of you are not confused about that, and that's why you're here. I also believe that we have great opportunity and potential to really have an impact in the next 41 days. And that it's really time for us to put everything on the line to save, the future of our planet, of democracy, and future generations. And so, let's see. I'm trying to figure out how to advance my slides here. Sorry. So just a little bit about Positive Women's Network. We are the only national organization in the US that is led by and for women and trans people living with HIV. We were founded in 2008 by 28 very diverse women living with HIV, including women of trans experience. Today, we have over 3,000 members nationwide. We have an active mobilizable presence in about 19 states. And that means that we have members who are organizing and mobilizing to change policies and improve their communities in about 20 states across the country. And our mission is to prepare and involve women living with HIV in all of our diversity, in all levels of policy and decision making. And that's because we believe that when those who are most impacted by issues are defining the agenda for solving problems, identifying problems, solving problems, proposing solutions, that's when we all win, right? So we are very clear that specifically when we uplift Black women living with HIV, who are the majority of women living with HIV in the US, when we uplift trans women living with HIV who really are at the intersection of facing multiple forms of oppression and marginalization, when we uplift low-income people living with HIV and people who do not have a lot of formal education who are living with HIV, that's when we get solutions that really work best for all of our communities. And so that's the orientation we bring to this work. And it's the orientation we bring to our, how we look at voting and electoral politics as well. And so this is just a little bit about our policy agenda. I'm not going to go into it, but you know, these issues, universal health care, reproductive justice, economic justice, so protecting financial security, ending violence against our communities, protecting trans rights, ending criminalization of our people. These issues are policy issues that we work on all the time, all year round, day after day, and all of them are on our ballot this time, and they're on our ballot in multiple ways. And so, so this year in 2020, I think we all understand what is at stake, but I'll just say a little bit. You know, we are in the midst of a fight to protect basic human rights and dignity. This administration has tried time and again to undermine LGBTQ rights, specifically to even define transgender people out of existence in ways that would create even more vulnerability for our trans family, our trans siblings, by limiting access to housing, services, employment. This administration has systematically tried to take away our healthcare and is continuing to try to do that. The Supreme Court is actually hearing another case on the Affordable Care Act starting in the week after the election. This administration has failed to demonstrate any leadership on a pandemic that is primarily in the US impacting Black and Latinx and Indigenous communities and decimating them. And, you know, we passed the terrible number of 200,000 deaths yesterday from COVID-19. And this was completely preventable. And those are just the reported deaths, right? We are in an environment where our political leadership, not only the administration, but other political leadership has not really, it is not necessarily committed to upholding human rights in various ways, including making sure that people have basic income, that people can survive, you know, that has threatened things like SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is food stamps basically, and EBT. And so, and we're also in the midst of an uprising and a reckoning around our legacy of anti-Black racism and racial injustice, period, that has led to some really important conversations about what abolition means in this context and how we really understand racial inequity and racial inequality that has been perpetuated over generations, you know, and since the United States was really, you know, allegedly founded. And so we're in a moment where climate change is inescapably real, and we don't have time. There is no more time to, you know, to say we're going to delay this by another 4 years. Maybe we'll have something better in another 2 years or 4 years, or a better political leadership in 10 years. We don't actually have that time. People are dying and rights are being taken away. And what has happened over the last 4 years has already had such dire consequences for our people, including setting up courts that are very highly conservative and that will systematically rule in ways that take away people's human rights for generations. And so we have already lost a lot of ground. We cannot afford to lose any more ground. And so this is, I would argue, the most important election of our lifetimes. It is time in the next 41 days, that's how much time we have until the polls close, to look deep inside ourselves and ask ourselves what we are willing to do to make sure that all of these things that we fight for every day, the Ryan White program, how do we make sure it survives? We make sure it survives by changing who's in power. The Healthcare Affordable Care Act, how do we make sure it survives? We do that by changing who's in power. Reproductive rights are on the line. Roe versus Wade is very much at risk of being overturned. Abortion rights are also on the ballot at the state level. LGBTQ rights are on the ballot at local and state levels. The way that we whatever we do in the next 41 days is really going to determine our future. And so this is really a call to everybody, no matter what you do. All of you are advocates, all of you are organizers, whatever you do, think about what time you can spend working on this election right now, because if we don't, all the other work we do is not going to be as relevant. It's going to be much, much, much harder. How do we end an HIV epidemic without healthcare? How do we end an HIV epidemic without housing? How do we end an HIV epidemic if LGBTQ communities do not have human rights? And if we don't have sex education in our schools, right? So I would argue that, like anything else really at this point, we should consider putting on hold for the next 41 days. We can come back to it. What we do now is going to create the context for the rest of our work. So elections have consequences, and even, we've had some victories, even in the midst of all of this like difficulty and challenges and hardship. And this year has been really hard for everybody. We're in a pandemic, we're in a recession, we have lost people that we deeply care about. We have seen white supremacy, fascism, authoritarianism really rearing their ugly heads. We've seen an increase in, hate-motivated violence on the basis of race, on the basis of like transphobia, homophobia. But we have also seen some victories as a result of long-term organizing and electoral work that has happened. And so in the midst of the uprising and this call to defund the police and to reinvest in community safety, we saw that in Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered, the city council did vote to replace police with a community-led model. And that was this summer. And that was not something that happened just because of this uprising, right? That was something that happened because people organized in Minneapolis for many years to get progressive young people of color on the city council. And they won, they won in 2018. They were able to get some really great city council members seated. And so this is like a long-term struggle, and this is what it takes, so that the uprising moment was a moment where the window of opportunity around what was politically possible had changed. In San Francisco, we elected recently a very progressive district attorney who has since ended cash bail for all criminal cases. So these are things that directly impact our communities every day, right? And so a lot of times when we're focused on elections, we only think about the presidency, or we're very focused on the presidency. That is absolutely important. Everything at the top of your ballot is important, but all of the stuff down your ballot is just as important. And in many ways has even more of an impact on the everyday lives of people we know and love. So, every single issue that y'all are working on, that we are working on collectively, is on your ballot. District attorneys and judges are making decisions about bail, about HIV criminalization, about how sex workers will be policed in your communities. City council members are making decisions about the city budget, potholes, where to invest. Attorney generals are making decisions, these are your state attorney generals, making decisions about the conditions of prisons and jails, and the extent to which they are collaborating with healthcare systems and things like that, and the rights of trans folks when they're incarcerated. These are just examples. State legislators and governors are making decisions on Medicaid, who will have it, how widely it will be expanded, what reproductive rights will be, what sex education might look like in schools, HIV criminalization laws, rights of LGBTQ communities. And then of course, we know that, Congress and the president have a lot of impact on a whole range of things, and senators, very importantly, determine who sits on the Supreme Court. And I think, with the tragic loss of our champion Ruth Bader Ginsburg recently, I think we've all, had to really look at what the implications of that are for the future. And there are a number of Senate races, key Senate races happening right now, some of which are winnable by more progressive candidates, but only with hard work. In addition to all of these candidate races, there are actual issues written on your ballots, and these are called different things in different states. And at different levels. These might be at the city level, they might be at the county level, they might be at the state level. Different places some places have propositions or ballot measures on the ballot this year, and some do not. Here are just a couple of examples of propositions and ballot measures that we know about and are focused on. In Colorado, there is an abortion ban on the ballot, Proposition 115. In Colorado, there is also a proposition on the ballot that would expand family medical leave, so that workers can take 12 weeks off of work because in case of illness, or to care for a loved one who is ill. Also, that would be expanded in the case of pregnancy. I think there's an additional 4 weeks in the case of pregnancy. So this is basically making sure that people can keep their jobs and still get paid. And this is something that would directly impact mostly working class families, right? Working class people. So these are things that are directly on the ballot in Colorado in November that folks will be voting on. This is important. In Philadelphia, there are multiple local questions on the ballot, and one of them is question 1, which would end stop and frisk practices in Philly. We know that stop and frisk is racialized profiling generally by police, and often can result in really terrible consequences. Including, ranging from like fines to jail sentences to police brutality. Especially against Black people and brown people. And so these are questions that voters are going to be able to directly vote on in November. You may have some of these types of questions on your ballots as well. The HIV community has so much power to impact elections. And that's one of the things I want to talk about as well. We are a community that many people are not specifically reaching out to around elections. So there are over 1 million people living with HIV in the United States. There are millions others connected to HIV services, right? So if you think about your local AIDS service organization, community-based organization, prevention programs. They're providing, STI screening, HIV testing, HIV services. Collectively, the HIV service delivery infrastructure is reaching millions and millions of people in the United States. That is a lot of people. That is a lot of people that we could be reaching with election information, nonpartisan election information, to make sure that they know how to vote, where to vote, are registered to vote, are able to get to the polls, are able to participate. And there are, a lot of times people think that you need to have so many votes to make a difference, or my one vote doesn't really matter, but it does. In the year 2000, the presidential election swung by 537 votes in Florida. 537. That's, you probably know at least 100 people that you could reach between now and November 3rd. So if you and 4 of your friends reached 100 people each, you would basically be able to, reach this many people. 537 is not a lot of people. That's how much that presidential election swung by. And that presidential election really set up a whole series of policy issues and political environment that has changed the trajectory of this country. In 2016, although the The Democratic candidate, Hillary Clinton, won the popular vote by 3 million votes. The election fundamentally came down to less than 100,000 votes in 3 states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And so, you know, these are like, your vote really does matter. It matters no matter where you are. I worked on a city council race a few years ago where we lost by like 800 votes, right? So every vote really makes a difference, and can really radically change the future of possibility. But all of that said, we know that our communities are facing so many barriers to voting, including you know, long lines at voting places related to the pandemic. Many polling places have been closed or scaled back. So you know, long lines. The U.S. has always made it hard to vote. That's not accidental. There are other countries where everybody's automatically registered to vote, or where you don't even have to register to vote in order to vote. There are countries where election day is a national holiday. Everybody's just expected to vote. There are countries like Australia where you are mandated to vote. You can go and cast a blank ballot and say, like, I'm declining to participate, but you have to go and cast a ballot, something. So in the US, we have the opposite system. We make it as hard as possible for people to vote. And that's not accidental. That's because our system is trying to keep certain people in power and certain people out of power. And so we don't even have, you know, election day isn't a holiday. You have to register. You have to have like all of these complicated forms of identification. They vary from state to state. They sometimes change. Your signature has to be done a certain way. That changes. People only have the right to like 2 hours off from work to be able to vote, and are not guaranteed to, like, they're not guaranteed that their employers will really, you know, hold their job for them. And that's not 2 hours with pay necessarily. And in you know, it may take more than 2 hours just to stand in line to vote in the US. So we have so many barriers to voting, and those are absolutely not accidental. And if your vote didn't really matter, they wouldn't make it so hard for us to vote, right? So in the era of the pandemic, we know that it may be there are even more barriers to voting, some of which we saw come up in the primary season. So, but our community is strong. And our community has always fought back and has achieved things that we barely thought were possible. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we can do, because I really do believe that there's a role for everybody in this moment, and that this is time to go all in, whatever that looks like for you. If you have 1 hour between now and November 3rd when the polls close, we need that hour. If you have 1 hour a day between now and when the polls close, we need that 1 hour a day. And if you have weekends, we need your weekends. So it is time to, you know, really think about what you can commit in this moment, and think about what you can take off your plate so that you can commit some time. So maybe that, you know, that coalition meeting you always go to, maybe your time could be better used, that 2 hours of coalition time, maybe you could use that 2 hours to get out the vote. Because that coalition is still going to be there in November, but the conditions that that coalition is operating in are going to be fundamentally different depending on the outcomes of this election. So we are here, you know, basically because we think it's critically important as Positive Women's Network to elevate the issues that are most important to people living with HIV and communities impacted by HIV in this election cycle, to increase voter turnout in our communities, to make sure folks understand what's on their ballots, to build concrete skills for people to influence elections, and to leverage our organizing power. We've been winning on many issues for a long time. This HIV community has changed the way drugs are approved at the FDA. The HIV community has modernized HIV laws in multiple states. We have been part of saving the Affordable Care Act and expanding Medicaid, and fighting for and getting the Ryan White program, which is the only program that is like a, quote, disease-specific program that is funded at the level of millions and millions of dollars year after year, specifically for people living with HIV. So don't tell me that we can't organize the vote, because I know we can leverage this power into votes at the ballot box. So a few quick things. There are ways to vote safely in a pandemic. We have to assume that the opposition forces, and by that I mean, white supremacy and like billionaires, do not really want us to participate in this process. We need to know about what is on our ballots and vote all the way down our ballots, and every single vote really matters. These are a few things you can do right now. I'm gonna make sure that you have these slides available with these resources, but I wanna talk specifically about a couple of these things. So it is really important to check and confirm your registration status. Even if you've been voting for 30 years, 40 years at the same address, there has been a lot of evidence in many states that conservative secretaries of state, Republican secretaries of state are trying to purge the voter rolls. They are taking people off the voter rolls. In fact, in Georgia, there was a story that came out a couple of weeks ago that like 200,000 people had been taken off the voter rolls. People don't know when they are taken off the voter rolls. They don't know when there's some sort of error, clerical error or mismatch in the filing system. Check and confirm your registration status. Even if you've lived at the same place with the same name forever and voted there, check it right now, check it today. The deadline to fix anything is coming up soon, and you do not want to get to the election day or your polling place and find out that you cannot vote after you've done all this work. You also should check if you can request a mail-in or absentee ballot. I know that people have some concerns about mail-in voting or absentee voting, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, but this is a really good option. Even if you don't use the postal system to send it, you can still request one. In most states, you can request a mail-in or absentee ballot, which means that you get more time with your ballot, you get it at home, you can fill it out at home, you can drop it off or walk it in. And you can make sure that everything is filled out correctly, exactly the way you want it to. You can go over the ballot with your friends, with your family, you can organize and vote together. That's what's called a voting block. If you can organize like 20 people to all vote the same way, you just made your own voting block. 20 of those voting blocks of 20 people each is like 400 votes, right? So we're almost at that number that it takes to swing a presidential election in 2000. You need to remind all your friends and family right now to also check their registration status and check on this mail-in or absentee ballot thing. And finally, it's really important to get involved. We need you, democracy needs you, the environment needs you, reproductive rights need you, LGBTQ rights need you, Black and brown people need you, immigrants need you, everybody needs you right now. So it's time to get involved. So I want to talk a little bit about voting safely in a pandemic. And these are my recommendations of how to vote in order. You have options. In most states, you have options. You can vote by mail, you can vote in person early, you can vote in person on election day. I really discourage folks to wait until election day to vote. I know that it's exciting. It's nice to go to the polling place on election day, see who's voting, see what's going on. Please don't do that. Please cast your ballot before election day. There could be all kinds of shenanigans going on election day. They might move your polling place. They might shut a polling place down. They might limit hours. There might be long lines. You're contributing to long lines. Long lines are hard for people who cannot take time off of work, who need to run and pick up their kids from school, who cannot stand for a long time. You are contributing to the problem by voting on election day. Plus, on election day, if you have time to vote, you have time to volunteer instead. So we can use you, even if that's for that 2 hours that you were going to take to go vote. Please reconsider when you were planning to vote, and consider voting early in person or voting early absentee. So I want to talk a bit about vote by mail. What is vote by mail? Vote by mail is basically a way for voters to cast their ballots without going to a polling place in person. It's a form of absentee voting. And it's a catch-all term for lots of ways people can vote without showing up physically at the polling place. In most states, it does not replace in-person voting. It provides an additional option. Every state does have different laws on who can vote by mail and how. And sometimes these laws are different even within counties and states. So why would you vote by mail? There's been a lot of talk about vote by mail in the media. The president is really discouraging vote by mail and trying to cast all kinds of aspersions on it. Well, why do you think he's trying to do that? He's trying to do that because he knows that it's a great way to expand the electorate. And when more people vote, he is less likely to win. But it is well demonstrated that states with low barrier vote by mail processes have higher voter turnout. Higher voter turnout means more people who face higher barriers vote more. And that's Black and brown people, low income folks, young people, people with disabilities. Those are our people, right? Voting by mail or voting absentee is also safer in the COVID-19 pandemic. Even if you request a vote by mail ballot, again, you do not have to send it through the US postal system. Almost everywhere, almost every county and city has places where you can drop these ballots off in person, usually for a couple of weeks before the election, or you can take them right down to your county registrar's office and drop your ballot off there. You can also walk it in on election day if that's what you want to do, although again, I discourage folks voting on election day. It's voting by mail is also a better option for voters with disabilities. And sometimes for language barriers, it's also easier to research what's on your ballot if you get your ballot in the mail. It increases participation in down ballot races. So how many times have you had the experience of walking into the voting booth, getting your ballot, and you know, your ballot is like 4 pages long and you were like, well, I've heard of about, 3 or 4 of these races, but I don't know about all this other stuff. And you just have to kind of like either not respond, or you go based on their political party, or you go based on their names. You're like, oh, this sounds like a person of color, so I'm going to vote for them. This is real. This is sometimes how folks are voting. And propositions and issue measures are often written to be deliberately confusing. So not having time to do your homework really can make it harder to be an informed voter. Also, it can be hard to get to polling places on election day. And it's even harder now because polling places are being reduced due to coronavirus. So in some states, you need to have an excuse to vote by mail. In others, you don't. I'm going to skip over this because I know we're short on time. You can find out what your state offers. And here's some information about what specific states have. I can also provide you with a website where you can check this out. It is important, if you're voting by mail, to follow the instructions exactly. There are different court cases happening, even as recently as I think yesterday in Pennsylvania. There was a ruling in the courts that is requiring a certain type of signature match that might make it harder. So it is really important to follow the instructions exactly. A lot of people have concerns about vote by mail. They're saying it's new, it's not proven. It's not new, it is proven. In California, most voters have been voting by mail for a very long time. In fact, about a quarter of voters nationally voted by mail in the last 2 federal elections. In multiple states, mail balloting is the primary means of voting. And there's actually no evidence that vote by mail leads to more fraud, despite what the president is telling you. If you are voting in person, try to vote early. Most places have some form of early voting in person. That has been a battle, especially in places where there is Republican leadership that wants to suppress the vote, but folks have been fighting for you. They've been fighting for you to have more access to early voting, meaning that you could go in and vote maybe a couple of weeks before the election in person. You can vote at different locations, early vote locations in your community. It's safer. There are not long lines. It's safer during COVID. You reduce your risk of exposure. There are a lot of concerns that ballots that don't come in until election day, it's possible that the races could be called earlier than all the ballots get counted. So voting early is a better way to make sure that your vote counts. And so I want to just point you to a couple of resources to get involved. So we have lots of opportunities at PWN to get involved in voting. Right now we're running Get Out the Vote efforts in Colorado. I mentioned that we're working on a couple of state propositions there. We're leading virtual phone and text banks. We can train you to do this if you want to get involved. We're also organizing in Houston and Harris County to make sure that before the voter registration deadline, to reach unregistered Black and Latinx community members. And then after the voter reg deadline passes, we're flipping to voter mobilization. We're informing new folks about new early voting options. They have, for the first time ever, they have 24-hour early voting locations. And so we're going to make sure people know about those. We're also informing folks about things like curbside voting, where you can just pull up outside the polling place. A poll worker will bring you your ballot, and you can give it to them to return. So that's a really good option for seniors, for people with disability, for people who are concerned about COVID exposure. But these are things that folks don't know about. They're new ways of voting. And so there's a lot of information that needs to get out there, and a lot of community education that needs to get out there. In Pennsylvania, I mentioned that we're working on question 1, which would end stop and frisk. We're also working in Philly on question 3, which would establish a citizens oversight commission for the police. We are also informing voters about vote by mail options, opportunities, encouraging them to vote early. And we're working to increase turnout in low turnout zip codes. So, you know, because we understand what is at stake, we are going all in for 2020 in the next 41 days, and I want to invite you to do the same. And so here are some things you can do right now. You can get involved. You can sign up at this link. We have both paid and volunteer opportunities to get out the vote, and we will train you and prepare you to do this. Right now, you should register to vote by mail or absentee if you can, and tell everybody else you know to do the same. You should check your voter registration status. And right now, like tonight, after dinner, you should look at your calendar and plan for any hours you can give for the next 5 weeks. It's important to know that folks are already starting to vote. Ballots are already getting mailed in some states. So in some states, it is already starting to be too late to really have an impact on the election. In most states, ballots will be mailed or available in early October, like the 1st or 2nd week of October. That's our window of time. Voter registration deadlines are coming up in the next week to 2 weeks. So any time that you can give now is really important. Many people think that, oh, I'm going to take election day off and contribute on that day. Well, you know what? By that day, we've already won or lost. In California, I think like it's something like 60% of voters vote before election day. So by election day, we've already lost out on anyone new who could be registered in most states, except for states that have election day voter registration, which I think is only 1 or 2. And we've already lost out on all those people who voted early. And people have usually already made up their minds about how they're voting. So in terms of like persuading folks to participate and to participate all the way down the ballot, the time is really now. And I think, you know, it's really important to remember that we do this work because we know what is at stake, right? We know that Black people are being killed by the police. We know that trans folks are being murdered in the community, especially trans women of color. We know that immigrants are being targeted and policed. Like literally people's lives are on the line here. We know that 200,000 people have died from a preventable virus. We know that we are going to have to fight tooth and nail to hold on to LGBTQ rights and reproductive freedom. And so we do this work because it is so important, and I just invite you to join us in doing the same. So let's do this. I'll go ahead and stop sharing and I guess open up for questions.
Thank you. I'm going to start promoting folks to panelists so that you can turn on your camera and ask some questions. You can also put a question in the chat, but thank you so much, Nana. This is amazing, and I know I've learned a ton already, and I have some questions, but I'm gonna let others speak up first.
I have a question. Yes, I was all into it, y'all. I hope nobody didn't need me because I was learning some stuff. Banana, you say that we just sign up, even if you're not organizing in our state, we still can sign up and okay.
We will plug you into somewhere, yep.
Okay.
Anywhere you are in the US, yep.
Do you do you have a sense? It's been a question I had. You know, because one of the options you talked about is dropping your absentee or mail-in ballot at the polling stations, and you know, preferably doing that early. Do you know what the like real time is on that? I mean, is there any delay in those being counted? You know, even if you're dropping them at the polling station versus going in person to vote. Do you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most places have drop-off ballot boxes that will be available for well before Election Day, like for a couple weeks before Election Day. And they're around town, and you can get a list of those on your county elections website. You can get a list of exactly where those are. So my top recommendation, like if I were advising everybody how to vote, it would be request an absentee ballot, fill it out with your friends, have like either like a get together, like virtual or in person with your pod. Fill out your ballots together, talk through them, make sure you understand everything that's on your ballot. Everybody fill it out. Make sure you follow all the instructions for how to sign it and how to seal it up correctly. And then take it to one of your drop-off locations well before Election Day and drop it off there. And those are, generally those should be picked up. Those are being checked like every day, sometimes multiple times a day, they're clearing those out. And so I believe that that is the best way to make sure that your vote is counted, better than taking it in on Election Day, although that is an option as well. What has happened in, like basically if sometimes they call races before they count all the ballots. And so the earlier you vote, the more likely your ballot is going to be one of those that gets counted. And in this particular time, we know that the president is likely to try to create some sort of fake news around victory, and it will be even more important to have your ballot in early, even more important than usual to have your ballot in early.
So, and also just around the Vote Positive USA, I mean, you don't have to be like a staff or member of PWN. I mean, this is really open to general public.
Yep, anybody, we want you all, this is all hands on deck time, right? There's a role for everybody, no matter what your experience is, we can train you, no matter what your skills are. Like there's a role for everybody, and get out the vote work always, right? If you are good at art, we need you to make signs. If you make great cookies, we need those cookies for people who are phone banking. If you like to talk to people, we need you to get on the phone and talk to voters, and we will give you a list, and we will train you on how to do that, and we will give you a script. If you like sitting behind your computer, but you don't really like talking to people, we are running a mass texting program where you can text voters about what is on their ballot. And we will, again, train you to do that. So there is literally a role for everyone to be part of this process, however much time you have to give.
Naina, I've got a quick question. So I'm in Philadelphia, and you talked a little bit about some of the ballot measures that we're dealing with locally. I took part in a phone banking training session earlier this week, and they talked a lot about the down ballot races. And I think Pennsylvania has been identified by the National Committee as one of the most important legislatures to overturn. So my question is, so I obviously live in a place where I can be doing a lot of work that is important locally. If you live in a state like California or a state like New York, for example, where at least at a national level, you're more likely to see people turning out Democrat, is your time better spent doing work outside of your own state?
That's a tricky question, because even in a place like New York or California, I'm a California resident and voter. Even in a place like California, there's a lot at stake on our ballot. We have important propositions. We have important local races. We have a kick-ass housing advocate running for city council in Oakland. There is really important stuff on my local ballot. And from a presidential perspective or from a Senate race perspective, there are more important places to work. So I would say that it's really about what matters to you. You can be involved anywhere. There are a lot of efforts though that will plug you into doing like sister district type work, or like swing left or seed the vote or indivisible. Any of those, if your passion is to work on the top of the ballot races and you're in what's considered a safe state that's not going to swing, those efforts are all good ones to check out. I'm going to put them in the chat box. If you check out their websites, you can sign up to, we have a big Senate race in Arizona, for example. In Arizona, there is a Senate race to, and the person who wins will actually be in office early enough. As of November 30th, they will be sworn in, which is much earlier than most senators will be sworn in. That means one more vote in the Senate potentially on a Supreme Court appointment. So that's a really important race from that perspective.
I put this in the chat, but does, there's a question from Rhea. Do you want to pose that one, Olivia, or do you want me to? About education around voting in Spanish. Does PWN have that?
Yes. Did you get the question?
Yeah. Sorry, I see the question. So at this time, we don't have materials or collaterals available in Spanish, but I certainly can follow up with you with other folks who do have some really great resources. I would recommend checking out Mi Gente. Mi Gente has awesome voter organizing resources in Spanish.
Thanks,
Mi
Naina.
Gente and Voto Latino are the two.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have a sense too on, success? Because we did a lot of, I've done both phone banking. I haven't done texting, but also postcard writing. Do you have a sense like which, have been, are starting to get more effective? I mean, because I'm getting a lot of spam calls on my phone and I keep ignoring them, and I'm almost wondering if some of those could be phone bank, and if that's like starting to happen with phone banking, or if it's been pretty successful getting through to people.
I can just tell you our anecdotal experience from this election cycle. So there are always studies on this stuff too, but the research is always changing, and it's probably different even this year because of the pandemic as well, and because more folks are home as well, and because technology continually changes and people's relationship to media and technology changes. So this is stuff that's like always evolving. So I don't know about the postcard writing. I know some folks are doing that. I think it's like a nice way to be like personal. I don't know of data on that. What I do know is that we are running phone banks and text banks, and what we're finding is that when we're phone banking on down ballot stuff, yes, there are a lot of people who are like, stop calling me, I've gotten 10 calls today. But if we're able to engage them and let them know that we're not calling them about that, usually it's like a house race or something that is blowing up their phone, like a US House of Representatives, where we're like, but have you heard about this proposition? Do you know that family medical leave is on your ballot? Do you know that reproductive rights are on your ballot? Do you know that ending racial profiling is on your ballot? Like, those are the things that if we can open with those, we've been able to actually engage people in a lot of conversations, and many folks are very grateful to have the information. So with phone banking in particular, some people, it is an opportunity to persuade and to go back and forth with someone and to really address their concerns and their questions. And so I do believe that it's totally worth it, despite, you know, the fact that some people will ignore your calls. Some people will say, don't call me again, stop calling me.
Yeah.
It's those, you know, it's those calls that make it worth it. And it's probably about, I would say like 10% or 10 to 15% of the people who pick up the phone, we have a very meaningful conversation with that results in like a positive ID, meaning like we get them to agree to vote the way we want to, which is pretty good if you can have a lot of those conversations.
That's awesome. Yeah. Anyone else have questions or want to share any experiences of engaging in volunteering?
And a lot of folks really don't know about things that are on their ballot besides the you know, the very well-funded campaigns that are showing up on their television and on the radio station. So even like smaller local candidates as well as local issues and stuff, it really can make a big difference.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think, I mean, I always find, you know, inevitably, you know, someone within my community, and, you know, sometimes I've been behind it, but that I trust and, you know, has had time to really vet and provide kind of an overview of what's on the ballot and different, you know, links and things around the different candidates. I mean, that's always been super helpful to kind of share. I mean, and not to say that you're going to say, oh, this is who you have to, but to have someone that's respected and vetting the different candidates and down ballot is always helpful. All right. Any other questions? I just want to, you know, kind of reiterate that this is being recorded and we're going to be sharing this along with all the different resources. We can include the slides on our website. So, and all the different links that have been shared here. So definitely everyone take a look at your voter registration at vote.org. Go to votepositiveusa.org, right?
Mm-hmm.
And check that and yep, and then like Nana said, text 10 people. and if you have, you know, a significant following on social media, you know, this is a time to kind of utilize it and encourage people. I mean, you don't have to be the voice of, you know, who to vote for or, you know, directing in one way, but the importance of registering and voting and the different ways to vote, you know, the different ways states have, you know, like the link I shared earlier shares about how each state, you know, different ways you can vote.
And it's changing also, like it's even changing now because there are like forces that are, you know, trying to limit access and forces that are trying to expand access, like even today. So we're not only calling people and texting them about these issues and what's on their ballots, we're also following up with them with this kind of information that, hey, did you know the rule just changed? Now you can vote. There are 24-hour voting locations in Harris County, like where you can go in 24 hours a day and vote. And here are the locations. Here's where you get the link. Here's the times. So, you know, that kind of stuff is what we really need to be able to share with folks too in real time. And we can use all the help we can get to make sure that our communities don't face unnecessary barriers to voting.
And Nana, I had one more question. I was wondering, so if we have folks that signed up to get an absentee ballot, where can they check the status of where their ballot is if they haven't received it yet? And then once they filled it out and they send it in, how can they make sure that it gets to the right place?
Yeah, so in California, you can check that on the Secretary of State website. You can sign up for ballot tracking services. And you can also look on your county website, your county registrar's office website. It will show you, it has a way for you to enter in as a voter, your name, your address, and it'll show you like ballot mailed, ballot received, which is really, I find that very comforting. Like that's actually one of the reasons that I drop off my ballot early, is because I want to see that my ballot was received on the website before Election Day.
That's great. Thank you.
So Olivia, I feel like, I know we're at time, but I feel like you should just share verbally what just happened to you.
At the bottom of the page, there is something that says that I have received this information in error. I just need to click through someplace else and check somewhere else. Because my address is a little bit of a weird address. There's a letter in it, and sometimes if the letter is placed in the wrong place, it comes up. I won't put y'all through that. I'll double check. For those interested, I will update you and let you know what happened. But it's definitely worth the check. The fear of the goddess is in me right now. I'm gonna get this straightened out. So it's worth it. And I live in a dastardly state. I wouldn't be surprised if they just completely wiped half the people off the voter rolls. So just checking.
Yeah. I have a similar situation because it shows my name in a very specific way because I have a hyphenated name, but sometimes like in the system I think it's not hyphenated, and it kind of had to shorten my first name to my first initial and middle initial. So like I checked too, and it didn't come through, but I remember this happening when I did the absentee for the primary. So I just have to figure out how they have my name in the system. So that can also be it. And having to try and look into that is not easy. Kind of have to.
Yeah, it's not easy, but it's definitely better to figure it out before you get to your polling place. And another thing that we have found in this election cycle is because of coronavirus, lots of polling locations are getting shut down. A lot of them, like they're reducing the number of physical polling locations. And that means in some cases that folks are having to travel like 5 or 10 or 20 miles to go vote, people without cars, but folks don't get that information. It doesn't get to them. So they show up, they go to their regular polling location they've been going to for years. They show up on election day to vote, and then the polling location isn't open. And then they don't have the time or the transportation to get to a place where they could go vote. So it is just so important that we reach out to as many people as possible. This time around, it's more important than ever.
I just did my requested my absentee ballot while we were doing this.
Yes,
And I
awesome.
signed up to volunteer. And I know that the week of early voting here, I'm gonna take that whole week off of work. And anybody who wanna go in person and vote, I'm gonna drive them safely, but I'm gonna do it. Yeah.
Amazing. That's awesome, Gina. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, and let us know what you're doing. I'm going to drop my email in here as well. If you're doing stuff like that, let us know. We'd love to figure out how to support you, and also, connect you with any resources we can, and also just highlight the work that you're doing. It's really great.
Well, thank you. This is amazing. And one last quick question. I mean, for some of the information that you said around the 24-hour early voting and even the curbside, is there a central place other than, I know I shared that, but now you kind of have to really research that.
It's really different state to state, but we are sending emails out. If you sign up on votepositiveusa.org, we're sending out resources for folks to check that stuff for their states. But here are some national resources I would recommend. Vote.org and vote411.org usually have links to all of your states to check your stuff. The other place to always go is your county elections office website. Become familiar with that. If you are an organizer in your community and you're talking to people about voting, be familiar with your county elections office website. Get to know your county elections clerk, because they're also going to be doing update sessions. They're doing phone calls, briefings, sign up on their list so that you can get information in real time as it's changing. County elections clerk. That's where you can go to get the most up-to-date information. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that sometimes things are changing by the day or by the week. So checking back really matters.
Okay, thank you. This is amazing. And the voter registration deadline, is that different for?
It's different state to state also.
That's also something.
We legit make it as hard as possible for people to participate. So in most places, the voter reg deadline is going to be somewhere between September 30th and October 10th. But there are some states, there's a a couple of states, I think Colorado has like same day voter registration where you can register and vote on the same day. But that's very few states have that.
All right, so
And I would
everyone
think-
go check it out.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I was listening to something today locally about the deadlines for when to send in your absentee, when to request the absentee ballot, when to send it in. So I imagine all of those things really vary state by state as well.
They do, yeah. Yep. And if you have specific questions or are having trouble finding the information for your state or your county, just email me and we'll find it for you. Oh, cool. That's a great website.
Thank you so much. This is amazing, and we're definitely going to be sharing this far and wide. And I hope everyone signs up their email at the votepositiveusa.org. Get involved. If you have any questions for Nana, you can always get in touch with us if you don't already have her information, and we'll put you in touch with them and our partners at PWN. And I just hope everyone can do whatever they can to get involved, whether it be just talking to one person and then make a goal for 5 people. And then, so it's do little by little. It's really, really important. So thank you so much. This is awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, may the work we do for the next 41 days determine how we feel when we wake up on November 4th.
Yes.
Thank you, Nana.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. Bye,
Okay.
everyone.
Take good care,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
You
Bye.
too.
Everyone, take good care.